Alright, so my name is Bud Ryer. I will be doing my presentation 1 on week 3 in terms for the critical analysis for this presentation. I've chosen to do Spider-Man as my critical analysis comparative. So I will be comparing Spider-Man 1 to the archetypal criticism of week 3 that Mr. Babiak has presented for us. Presenting week 3, we'll be talking about Spider-Man and all the different common archetypes that are associated with Spider-Man, as well as the character, situational, common images, animals, and the monomyth concept that is presented will all be compared to Spider-Man. Spider-Man 1, we're all familiar with that. Pretty popular Marvel movie. We'll be moving on to the next slide here. So beginning off with slide number 3, where we're talking about Carl Jung. He was a psychologist and a psychiatrist, born 1875, 1961. He lived for a pretty long age, considering the events that happened during that time. But yeah, he really got into some interesting things. He was kind of like the guy who invented archetypes, or you know transpired them into what they are today. He really believed that the collective unconsciousness is where they were housed, and the collective unconsciousness is essentially a layer of the human psyche below the awareness of our unconscious mind that is shared by all humans, both transnational and historical. So kind of just to go on that, in literacy, characters, images, and themes that symbolically embody universal meanings and basic human experiences, regardless of when or where they live, are considered archetypes. So anything that can be noticed and understood nationally or historically by the human culture or humans can be considered an archetype. And we see this a lot in movies, books, songs, plays. Authors and creators use archetypes to connect with visual or people that are reading or absorbing this information or storyline or anything along the lines of that. So yeah, he was a pretty influential man. He believed that the archetypes were housed within the collective unconsciousness. Um, so yeah, we'll move on to the next slide. So an archetype, basic component of human psychic nature, or symbols that resonate to universal symbols that we know respond like today. So an example that Mr. Babiak used that I kind of want to use as well, just because it's simple and it's very well laid out, is witch and godmother. So a witch, just by growing up and watching films and reading books, we know is a bad person. They cast spells upon people. They're out to cause havoc. Whereas a godmother, like a fairy godmother, is there to rescue you and provide assistance. And we kind of use these archetypes and translate them into today's society. So you can have an archetype of a witch, which is maybe a bad mom, or a godmother, which is a good mom. And all these help the user, me, or whoever is absorbing this, understand the good and bad of it. So yeah, in literature, characters, images, and themes that symbolically embody universal meanings of basic human experiences, regardless of when or where they live. So we just kind of covered that, but that's just the general understanding of an archetype. So we can kind of break this down into different archetypes. There's the character archetype. The hero is the one I'm going to use just because it relates the best with Spider-Man. So the hero is a courageous figure he's the one that always is running to save the day, just to save whoever's in need of help. Protagonist is different from a hero, though, and that's one thing you must consider when you're writing essays like this, or videos, that you can't compare the two. A protagonist, we'll use example Wilbur from the Charlotte's Web, the pig. He, at the end of the day, saved himself from getting killed on the farm, or saved himself from being exterminated or left, but it was all the means of himself. He didn't really do anything as a whole, as the whole farm, or as the whole area which in the farm was located. A hero is opposite of that. A hero is out there to save, not mankind, but it could be a place, it could be the world. It's a large demographic that the hero covers, not just one, two, maybe themselves, maybe along the lines of that. So Spider-Man kind of does that as well. Spider-Man obviously fights crime in New York City, so he's protecting the inhabitants in that area. But he's also protecting who knows what else these evil villains would do afterwards. Green Goblin, evil scientist, he could have easily, you know, on his wrath could destroy all of New York City or the entire world. Sandman, which is, or Sandman, uh, Spider-Man 2, there's a Sandman who is a guy who transforms this giant sand guy, and he could have done some damage as well. So Spider-Man in the end is protecting the inhabitants of the world, but mostly New York City. Situational archetype. So we just kind of quickly covered this, but we'll go over more. Situational archetype is a situation that occurs transnationally across all literature. Common archetypes are quests, initiations, scapegoats, descents into the underworld, and ascents to heaven. So a quest could be Lord of the Rings. They have to take this long journey to find the ring. Initiations could be something as far as line as you are now initiated into this life. You are now a part of this. I'm trying to think of an example, but nothing really comes to mind. Scapegoats, that could be someone you blame. So there's always someone that you blame it something on, so they feel they have to do something about it. Descents in the underworld, so that could be mythological. A comparison to Hades, the Lord of the Underground, and Ascents to Heaven, so maybe Jesus in the Bible. Any stories along that line could be a situational archetype. But obviously, Spider-Man falls. I believe there to be at least 2 situational archetypes. I mean, the more I read it, you could really pan it out. I think he falls under the initiation and quest. So he lacks normal experiences due to being bullied. So he's kind of outcast in some sense. So I think that kind of stems from when he gets bitten by the spider, why he kind of wants to help people, because he's been bullied his whole life. He wants to be kind of that guy that saves everything and makes everything better, but also quest. So there's always, in every movie we find, there's always a new bad guy that he has to stop, and I find that the quest is he finds the or he hears about the problem, he goes and fights it, and he returns back to Mary Jane or whoever he's with now, because it changes every couple of movies. So thrown into adventure when the spider bites him, he gives him powers. He uses these new powers to fight crime and defeats the Green Goblin in New York City. That's a spelling mistake. I apologize. Common image archetypes. So these are images that can be related, throughout literature, movies, anything that's visual, essentially. So certain images that reoccur in myths and literature and have other genres of literature often have common meanings that tend to elicit comparable psychological response or serve similar culture functions. So examples of these can be objects, colors, shapes. In the week 3, you use Mr. Babyak uses examples of water and suns, which is like the great unknown, and energy. Also, number 3 and 4 and 7 have meanings behind it. And also colors as well. So I just kind of used Spider-Man's outfit as his base of his common image archetype. So blue and red. So the red is sacrifice and passion and love. So although he's been bullied, he has this passion and love to save the city, but also the sacrifice too, because he's been bitten and he didn't want to be bitten. So it's a sacrifice now that he has to live with. He's now destined, or not destined, but he's now forced with using these powers to save New York City and mankind, essentially. The blue is sadness and truth. So Uncle Ben is his grandpa, or his uncle, I guess, but it's portrayed as a grandpa in the movie, who dies suddenly after he gets these powers, and he uses this sadness to kind of fuel his good aspect throughout the movie. So with great power comes great opportunity or respect. So you have to respect your power, and you have to understand that there is more to it than just being Spider-Man. I also looked up online to find if the web was symbolic, and it means heroism. Didn't know that, so it's very interesting. And then to compare that with the Green Goblin, you've got jealousy and greed. So he's all green. He's jealous because he's an underrated scientist that wants to try new things, and he gets this power, and he doesn't know what to do with it. And thus, Spider-Man comes in and saves the day. Monomyth, we'll talk about this. This is Joseph Campbell kind of concept this idea. Born 1904, died 1988. He was a mythologist and a college professor, so he's kind of a two-way man. Campbell was very interested in Jung's idea of the hero/quest archetype. He believed there was a common pattern that is hidden within myths and literature. From this, he developed a concept called the monomyth, where a certain character must follow certain criteria and stages. So he kind of coined this cycle, if you would, to each hero or quest archetype. And here is the model. So there's three main steps to this. We got separation, initiation, and return. So every adventure starts off the call to adventure, the refusal to call. So that could be, when Spider-Man, he didn't really get refused it. It was kind of bitten upon him where he was forced into it. Then belly of the whale. That's what I like to go on as a. He's in it now. He starts using his powers. He starts learning what he can do. He starts using this to get a card because he starts fighting crime and going into cage matches with guys to get money. The road to trial. So Mary Jane gives him support. This is usually a woman figure throughout the process. Gives him support as he now exposes himself to her only that he is Spider-Man. She gives him support through all these heroistic situations. Entertainment with dad. So his uncle passed away, which is his only father figure throughout the entire film. So with that, he has to overcome the tragedy of his dad and use that as good. So he's using that to fuel his goodness or respect for the power he received. And to kind of go along with that, you have, he finishes off freedom to live. So once he defeats the Green Goblin, as of for right now, there is no bad in the world, but he's still, obligated to do his duties, as you will see in Spider-Man Part 2, 3, whatever they want to do with it. But that's essentially the cycle that he follows. Now, the cycle not always is going to be exactly for every movie. So, or movie, literature, reading, anything. This model is just a basis of what it can happen. There may be stages that aren't involved, but that's the way it is. I guess an example of this would be Spider-Man 1. He has a new power. He saves the world. He comes home to grandmother/Mary Jane. Whereas in Spider-Man 2, he's avenging his dad's death to save the city, and then he returns to the girl. So the steps are a little bit different, but they're all along the same monomyth stage. And I think that concludes my week 3 critical analysis of archetypes. Thank you very much, and look forward to the rest of the semester. Thank you.